Chapter 113. Found a big treasure still talking tough. Zack put his hands on the keyboard and mouse and officially began his journey to Link the Fire. He was still pretty excited. Nebula Games was one of his favorite game companies. Even though their games often messed with players, like Overcooked, which had him washing dishes to this very day, or Valiant Hearts, The Great War, which had made him shed more than a few tears not long ago. You still had to admit, these games could really touch a player's heart. And now, with Dark Souls as Nebula Games' first big title, he couldn't be more hyped. Passing on the flame of hope in a world of despair, just thinking about it got his blood pumping. Sure, it might make him cry a lot again, but so what? He was ready. On the road ahead in the game, there were many strange, blood-like symbols he couldn't read. Zack knew what they were though, because during the online launch event, Lucas had already explained this special system. Players could also leave messages in different parts of the game world. It was one of Dark Souls' main features, basically like a message board. Of course, the messages had a set format, and all content would go through review. If someone left bad or inappropriate remarks, they'd get a warning, and repeat offenders would be banned from online play. Looking at the system messages in the game now, Zack followed the prompts and tried out different moves: rolling, light attacks, heavy attacks. Unlike other games with flashy combat moves, Dark Souls felt heavy and solid. Rolling, slashing, and even hitting a rock gave strong feedback. The only thing Zack wasn't used to was how quickly the stamina bar ran out. Roll once, swing a few times, and it was empty. Even running drained stamina. It felt a bit limiting. But Zack didn't think too much about it. He figured he'd probably get more stamina later through leveling up or gear. After all, he was just a blank slate character right now. Before long, he ran into his first enemy, a creature called a hollow, which looked like a skeleton foot soldier. But it was super easy to deal with. He just smacked it twice with his little drumstick weapon and its health bar was gone. This little guy's way too easy. Wait, this game doesn't have a minimap. Hannah, who was sitting next to him, commented now and then. Zack, still playing, was also a bit puzzled. Even though it was still early in the game, he could tell Dark Souls was different from other games. There was no difficulty setting before starting, and these enemies were way too weak. No challenge at all. As for the minimap, he wasn't used to it being absent, but he had a guess. We probably haven't reached the story trigger yet. Later, we'll meet an NPC who will give us a map, Zack said. Moving forward, he found a corpse near something like a fountain and picked up a blue flask. An Estus flask, orange is for health, blue is for magic, like Fanta and Gatorade, Zack joked after reading the description. Who even renames items like that? Hannah rolled her eyes, though she had to admit it did sound kind of catchy and easy to remember. Continuing on, they saw more messages on the ground, teaching the player things like how to raise a shield. Basically, it was a tutorial area. Here, Zack learned combat arts, dual wielding, and other basic controls. The path was filled with weak, slow, stiff enemies that went down easily. The little drumstick from the starting gear could take them out in 2 hits, and the small wooden shield was surprisingly good for defense. How is this game even considered hard? Hannah muttered, watching Zack mow down hollows while remembering the high difficulty label she'd seen in the store page, feeling a bit annoyed. She's not really going to sit there the whole afternoon, is she? Hearing his girlfriend's complaint, Zack chuckled. Can't help it. With my skills, it's hard to die even if I wanted to. He finished off the small fry, and the soul count in the bottom right kept going up. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he guessed it was probably money or experience in the game. Still no idea what it was for. Moving forward under the cold sunlight, the rugged mountain path split into 2. One led straight to the cliff edge, where there was a huge half-open stone gate. The surrounding buildings were crumbling, clearly very old. The other was a narrow, winding path to the right. The cliff road should be the main story path, and this little winding path probably hides some collectible items. As an old gamer, Zack quickly figured out the difference between the 2 routes. All those years of gaming weren't for nothing, he had the experience. My gut tells me there's definitely a big treasure in there. Zack said proudly, sneaking a glance at his girlfriend. Hannah rolled her eyes. Big treasures usually have scary beasts guarding them. With your skinny arms and legs, you'd probably drop dead on the spot. No way, even if there's a monster, it should just be a bit tougher than the zombies earlier. Zack was feeling relaxed. After all, his total beatdown of the zombies had given him a lot of confidence. Going deeper in, the narrow rocky path was covered in dried vines, and Zack spotted a message on the ground ahead. He opened it and saw 3 words: "Turn back now." Turn back. No way he was turning back. He'd already come this far, so of course he had to see what was inside. Ignoring the warning, Zack moved forward. He passed a small pond and arrived at a cave-like area. Not far away, a huge crystal lizard was lying there. Zack's eyes widened when he saw it. The thing was enormous. "Looks like you really did find a big treasure," Hannah's voice came in right on cue. The crystal lizard seemed to notice the uninvited guest entering its territory. It stood up and stared at Zack's character like a predator. "No big deal, this is probably just a mini-elite monster. Look at that short health bar, I'll smash it with 2 chicken legs." Zack took a deep breath, and the more he talked, the more he believed it himself. Yeah, that health bar was short. Definitely not a boss, maybe it just looked scary but was weak inside. Thinking that, Zack charged forward with his little chicken leg weapon and a beat-up wooden shield. End of the chapter. As Zack rushed in, the crystal lizard roared and suddenly leapt up. Seeing it coming down, Zack instinctively rolled. But the timing was really awkward. When rolling, there's a short, invincible frame, where you can avoid all damage from attacks. But that invincibility only lasts for a very short moment. If you roll too early or too late, you'll still take the hit. Zack rolled too late. He didn't dodge during the invincible frame, and he didn't even get out of the monster's attack range. With a loud crash, the crystal lizard landed, sending blue crystal spikes across the ground. At the same time, Zack's health bar dropped by almost half. His character, 123, was also sent flying by the impact. What the hell, what kind of damage is that? Zack was stunned in front of the screen. That was way too much damage. 1 hit and almost half his health was gone. Zack panicked instantly. He rolled twice in a row to create distance, then switched to his Estus flask and drank to recover his health. But right then, the crystal lizard charged again. This time Zack didn't roll, he clicked to raise his small wooden shield to block. But the stamina he had left after those rolls hadn't recovered yet, and with 2 heavy slaps from the charging lizard, his stamina bar was completely emptied. In Dark Souls, you could say that sometimes the stamina bar is even more important than your health bar. Health just looks nice on the screen, but if you run out of stamina, no matter how much health you have, it won't be enough to save you. With his stamina bar completely emptied, Zack saw his in-game character, 123, go into a stunned state, just standing there like a fool. At the same time, the crystal lizard smacked him hard with its claws, sending 123 flying again. What? Why is my health bar like it's made of paper? Zack finally felt something wasn't right. If that earlier body slam was considered the monster's skill, then fine. But how could just a normal slap take away 1/3 of his health? Sure, his character was a blank slate and only wearing shorts. But wasn't this monster's damage way too crazy? Didn't the hint tell you to turn back? Clearly, this isn't something you can handle. Hannah laughed happily next to him. Because soon it would be her turn to play. Come on, fight back. Why do you keep rolling away? Oops, no stamina again. Hit it already. Are you planning to wait until the monster dies of exhaustion? Normally, Zack would have thrown back a few lines, but now he had no time at all. If his feelings right now could be summed up in the title of a book, that book would be called Oppression. It was just too overwhelming. The pressure was unbelievable. The crystal lizard in front of him was attacking like crazy. Charging, biting, leaping, even rolling at him like a wheel, and it attacked so fast. He couldn't block it all no matter what. How am I supposed to fight this? It's not that tanky, but I can't even hit it. Drinking his last bottle of orange juice, Zack watched as the rolling attack crushed his in-game character, 123, again and again. This was ridiculous to the extreme. With 123 letting out a sharp, tragic scream, then falling to his knees, the crystal lizard turned away with disdain. The bright red screen faded into dark red, then black and white, along with a sad death BGM. In the center of the screen, a large line of text appeared: "You died." At the same time, an achievement notification popped up in the lower right corner. First time. In Dark Souls, Lucas had added many collectible achievements. Just like in his past life on PlayStation, there were trophies in bronze, silver and gold tiers, with a platinum trophy for unlocking them all. For the game's platform, this was a good way to keep players hooked. In his previous life, there were many players who collected trophies, and even whole trophy games were made, simple games designed to make getting platinum trophies easy, which some developers made a living from. Seeing the trophy pop up, Zack thought it was a bit interesting, but mostly he was speechless. How long had it been, and he'd already lost his first life? With a sigh, Zack gave up his seat. The seat had just gotten warm. Hannah happily sat down, testing a few moves in the cemetery of ash. But soon she shouted, "My money, why is all my money gone after dying?" Looking at the soul counter in the lower right corner, it showed an empty 0. Checking the rest of the game, it was clear this wasn't because the save had reverted, it was simply how the game worked. "I think that's just the game system, but if you go back to the crystal lizard, you should be able to pick it up," Zack guessed, even sounding a bit hopeful. "I'm not going," Hannah pouted. She wasn't stupid. Even if she went, she couldn't beat the crystal lizard. She might not even reach the dropped souls, and if she got them back only to die again, that would be like digging her own grave. More importantly, if she died, it'd be someone else's turn to play. That monster clearly isn't meant for early game. The game even told you to turn back, but you just charged in like an idiot, Hannah said, while happily taking another path toward the cliff. Along the way, she only met some weak undead that went down in 2 hits. She lit her first bonfire and kept going forward. Following the system's hint, she even pulled off a drop attack, smashing an undead's head to bits. Even though the moves in the game were very simple, there was something about that plain, chopping motion. When it hit a monster, the feeling along with the sound effect was just so satisfying. But soon, Hannah had her first hit in the game. It happened when she was walking toward a big door. There was an archer zombie standing there, and she didn't notice it in time, so she got shot. Her health bar dropped by about a quarter. Looking at the health bar in the top left corner, Hannah suddenly had a bad feeling. One arrow took almost a quarter of her health. She couldn't stand seeing it like that, so she drank from her flask to fill it back up. "Isn't that normal? I just got smacked by a crystal lizard and lost half my health. The useless guy we're playing as isn't wearing anything, so of course he's not tough," Zack said beside her. "That kind of makes sense," Hannah nodded. "Right, that's true. A sword hitting armor is totally different from hitting bare skin." Feeling a little better, Hannah walked through the ancient bronze door and into a courtyard. In the distance stood the Eudex Gunda, with a spiral sword stuck in his chest. The moment they saw him, both Hannah and Zack's eyes lit up. They knew this boss. It was the one getting wrecked in the trailer during the online showcase. No wonder it looked weak back then. It was just the beginner area boss. Instead of rushing in to trigger the fight, Hannah first took a look around the courtyard. But soon, she noticed something that shocked her. "Oh my God, this courtyard." Her eyes went wide, only she knew what she was seeing. End of the chapter. Right now, Hannah was in a round courtyard. On the right was a cliff, and on the left were countless gravestones and piles of lit candles. In the middle stood the Ash Judge Gunda, still as a stone statue. But what really caught Hannah's attention wasn't him, it was the bloodstains on the ground. Next to Gunda, she could see at least 20 or 30 bloodstains. In Dark Souls, when players play online, their game data is sent to the server. One thing that's different from other games is that, besides messages, the way a player dies can also randomly appear in other players' worlds. It's random, but recent deaths get the highest priority. The reason for placing so many here was to give players some comfort. To let them know they're not alone in this hopeless world. Getting schooled by Uncle Gunda right after entering the game wasn't something that only happened to them. And right now, the 20 or 30 bloodstains in front of Hannah meant that many people had already fallen here. Oh my God, how many people died here? Hannah's bad feeling grew stronger. She moved her in-game character, 123, over one of the bloodstains and pressed the interact button. The stain turned into a red phantom, rolled twice on the ground, then got stabbed by something and went flying into the air before crashing down and dying. She checked a few more stains nearby, and the deaths were all different. Some got launched into the air, some looked flattened, some seemed to be skewered. But there was one thing they all had in common. Before dying, every phantom was rolling around on the ground. This is bad. I think Gunda might be really strong. Hannah was starting to feel uneasy. Zack also sensed something was off, but he still said, "You're falling for it. Why do you think you can only see the moment they die?" This is Lucas's trap. He's messing with players' minds like this to make them more and more nervous. The unknown is the scariest part, just like in Outlast, Zack said confidently. Hannah thought for a moment. So you mean Gunda might actually be weak, and Lucas is just using tricks to make it seem scary? Zack shook his head. No, I mean hurry up and start the fight. If you die, it's my turn. Get lost, Hannah rolled her eyes. With a mix of tension and excitement, Hannah took a deep breath, moved her character forward and triggered the cutscene. In the game, the character tightened their waist, gripped the spiral sword stuck in Eudex Gunda's chest with both hands, and slowly pulled it backward. Puffing. A stream of black blood gushed from Gunda's chest, and at the same time, the spiral sword was slowly drawn out. When the sword was finally pulled free, the screen shook. The Gunda that had been kneeling on the ground like a stone statue now stood up, holding his halberd. Hannah had already seen this boss, Eudex Gunda, in the online showcase video. But watching the video and actually playing the game were two completely different things. His huge, ash-grey figure stood up, towering taller than three of her in-game character, 123, stacked on top of each other. That massive figure blocked out the cold sunlight, creating an overwhelming sight. As Gunda rose, grand background music and deep chanting filled the game. An atmosphere that could only be called epic took over, making Hannah feel unexpectedly fired up. At the bottom of the screen, a long health bar appeared along with the boss's name, Eudex Gunda. This was only the first boss fight of the game, but to Hannah, it already felt like the final battle in other games. In terms of atmosphere alone, Dark Souls was absolutely explosive. Now it's a fight to the death. You won't stop me from linking the fire. Listening to the vast, grand music, Hannah felt herself completely fired up. The acting mode in her just switched on. In the game, Gunda, now awake, was already launching his first attack. He took a heavy step forward, charging straight at Hannah. Dust flew as his huge halberd, light as a feather in his hands, swept across in a wide arc. Instinctively, Hannah rolled backward twice. That little flimsy shield she had, she doubted it could take a hit from Gunda's halberd. She'd already learned from watching Zack's first death just how important stamina was in this game. If your stamina bar emptied, you were in real trouble. So she figured rolling was safer. But after that first sweep, Gunda didn't let up. He followed with a jumping slash toward Hannah. This time, she wasn't so lucky. The hit landed, and her health bar dropped by half in an instant, like she'd been struck in a main artery. Oh my God, that damage is insane, Hannah was shocked. Now she understood why in every death clip she'd seen before, the player would just roll a bit and then die. Was this really supposed to be a beginner boss? Rolling across the ground in a panic, Hannah couldn't help but wonder. When she'd watched Zack fight the crystal lizard before, she could give commentary from the sidelines. But watching and playing were worlds apart. Now that she was holding the controller, she realized something was seriously off with this game. The crystal lizard wasn't a big deal. The turn-back message was right at the door. But this Eudex Gunda. This damn sense of pressure, why was it so strong? That's right. Pressure. For Hannah, who was touching Dark Souls for the first time, this boss fight was pure pressure. The huge, fierce Gunda swung his halberd in wide, powerful arcs, every move full of dominance. Especially when the halberd smashed into the ground, the sound effects and the dust clouds made it feel even heavier. Facing Gunda, Hannah spent most of the time running for her life. She mustered her courage once, sneaking in 2 quick hits when he paused after an attack, but with no stamina left to roll away, she got clipped by his halberd. That little hit still took half her health. Her Sunny D healing flasks were already gone. Out of ammo, out of options. She looked at Gunda, whose health was only down by about 1/10, then at her own sliver of HP. Hannah made her character, 123, charge forward bravely. She gave Gunda's foot a perfect massage. Surprisingly, it took off quite a bit of health. After a couple of solid whacks, Gunda's health bar dropped by another 1/10 or so. But the next moment, Gunda's halberd swung upward in a brutal uppercut. Her character was launched into the air, letting out a pitiful "ah." 3 words appeared in the center of the screen: "You died." End of the chapter. Did we open the game the wrong way? Hannah looked at Zach, completely confused. Something just felt off about this game. I have no idea either. After thinking for a long time, Zach finally squeezed out that one sentence. How was he supposed to know? Sure, it was kind of fun watching Hannah get completely wrecked by Iudex Gunda just now. But honestly, judging from how badly he did against that crystal lizard earlier, he probably wouldn't do much better himself. This Iudex Gunda guy felt like he was in the same difficulty tier anyway. And that burial gift, what's the point? I used it and just turned into a stone block, that's it. Hannah was also a bit speechless. She had already given up her seat, and now watched as Zach used that starting gift, the tree branch, only to see a transformation completely different from what she had imagined. In her mind, it should have been some kind of transformation charm. And since Dark Souls was listed in the store as a dark fantasy game, she imagined it would have elves, dwarves, dragons, goblins, and other fantasy races. A tree branch would obviously be linked to elves, so she thought that using it would turn the character into an ancient elf with maxed out stats and skills. But in reality, it just turned you into a stone block, and the moment you got hit, you turned back. The gap between her expectations and reality was way too big. Respawning at the bonfire, this time it was Zach's turn to control 123 in the game. But right away, he noticed a serious problem. All the small monsters on the road are alive again. Seeing the undead walking around ahead, Zach was stunned. He had assumed the bonfire was just a save point. He thought dying and coming back was basically loading the game, but clearly that wasn't the case. Resting at a bonfire also revived all the enemies on the path. Even though he hadn't played much yet, Zach already felt the difficulty heating up. The path from the first bonfire to Iudex Gunda's boss room wasn't long, and it was actually pretty easy. But this was just the start of the game. If the later areas worked the same way, and he died on the road without lighting a bonfire, wouldn't he have to run through everything again? By accident, Zach had just discovered a truth about the game. Still, even though he was surprised, he didn't dig deeper, he just figured it was a normal difficulty feature. For now, the biggest challenge in front of him was that boss called Iudex Gunda. When it was finally his turn to play, he didn't rush straight to the boss. Instead, he explored the cemetery of Ash to make sure there was no second path. That's when he confirmed it, this Iudex Gunda guy was the tutorial boss. Didn't the in-game tips teach how to parry with a shield? I remember seeing in the online launch event that Mr. Lucas parried this boss in the live demo and took off a huge chunk of its health. Hannah offered some advice from the side. But my shield, I don't think it can parry, Zach said, looking at his broken wooden shield. He let go of the button, and his shirtless 123 charged forward with the little wooden shield in hand. As for parrying barehanded, there was no hint about that in the game's tips, so Zach had no idea it was possible. And honestly, even if he did know, it probably wouldn't help much. I'll try again. I think using 2 hands might boost attack power. Holding his little chicken leg weapon and his broken wooden shield, Zach decided to give it another go. Carefully taking down the undead along the way, Zach soon reached the boss again. This time, the stone gate was covered by a thick white fog. When he got close and triggered it, the character stepped inside, and Zach saw that Iudex Gunda was no longer in statue form. He was now holding a halberd, packing back and forth. On the ground not far away, aside from the red bloodstains left by other players, there was also a green mark, the souls Zack had dropped when he died earlier. All right, let's have a fair fight. Switching to two-handed mode and using a battle cry, Zack saw a new sword icon with a plus sign appear under the status bar in the top left corner. Clearly, that meant his attack power had gone up. Cancelling two-handed mode, Zack bravely charged forward. He is great with the halberd. Let me have a sip of that orange juice with pulp, a sneak attack, that's cunning. This lousy wooden shield, one hit and my stamina bar's empty. What's so great about winning just because you have better gear, coward? Drop your weapon and fight me barehanded. The room was filled with angry, frustrated shouts. A minute later, the familiar scene appeared on the screen again, with those same 3 words. Zack's face grew tense. This game is so hard, Hannah finally sighed as she looked at Iudex Gunda, who had only lost about a quarter of his health. Hearing that, Zack instinctively nodded. How is this Iudex Gunda so strong? It's like Lubu come back to life. Who could possibly beat him? Is Nebula Games trolling us? Did they mess up the game's stats? Zack said, still shaken. Dark Souls had really hit him hard right from the start, like, really hard. He had never played a game like this before. This was just way too hard. Probably not. A big game like this would definitely be tested before release. And remember the presentation. They showed how parrying with the shield seems to be an important skill. If you succeed, you can do a big counterattack and take off a lot of health, Hannah guessed. Zack, who had just gotten up to give up his seat, suddenly had a light bulb moment. It was like a flash of lightning cleared away the dark fog in his mind. I get it, I understand now, so that's how it works, Zack said excitedly, like he'd just solved a tough high school problem. Remember the character they showed at the presentation? A knight. He had a shield, sword and armor. It's not just a class. Dark Souls probably links difficulty with the class you choose. Why can't the deprived's small wooden shield parry? It's to make it harder for the player. You have to rely on dodging and rolling to beat Iudex Gunda. But a knight starts with better gear, which makes it much easier, Zack said, brimming with excitement. Hannah thought about it and realized it actually made some sense. Should we start a new save then? She asked. Absolutely, Zack said, feeling proud and confident, like the clouds had just cleared. As a gamer, Zack was clearly experienced. Except it wasn't completely right. The way he thought about the problem was correct, but the answer, maybe not so much. End of the chapter. They quit the game and made a new character. The old 123 character was now history. The new AAA would be the new flame of hope. This time, Zack didn't spend time customizing the face. Since the knight class came with armor, a sword, and a shield, the helmet completely covered the head anyway. That meant you couldn't even see his detailed face work, so he skipped it. As for the burial gift, last time he had chosen a branch that might have some special use, but he didn't know what yet. He just knew it was completely useless against Iudex Gunda. So this time, after some discussion, Zack and Hannah chose the life ring that boosts health. If you don't know what the other items do, picking something that gives you more HP is always the safe choice. They skipped the intro cutscene, and when Hannah saw the armored AAA holding a sword and shield on the screen, she felt oddly reassured. Her confidence shot up for no reason. They moved forward just like before, clearing the hollow enemies one by one. They picked up the Ashen Estus flask that restores focus, lit the first bonfire, jumped onto the coffin to get a white item, a titanite shard, not that they knew what it was for. Hannah didn't bother going after the crystal lizard on the other path. After all, that lizard wasn't the one who humiliated her before. Her main target now was still Iudex Gunda. She went through the stone gate and into the courtyard. In the new save, Gunda was still kneeling just like before. The only difference was the courtyard's bloodstains. They were everywhere. Hannah took a moment to watch how other players had died. Most were pretty similar, but one thing made her nervous. She noticed quite a few dead players were also wearing knight armor. Some deaths looked especially bad. One side of the courtyard was full of gravestones and candles, while the other side was a sheer cliff. From the bloodstain replays, Hannah saw that plenty of players rolled their way to the cliff's edge, only to be knocked clean off. That convinced her to stay away from the cliff during the fight. Dying to Gunda in combat wasn't embarrassing, it wasn't her first time after all. But if you die because of the terrain, that's just embarrassing. It's not like this place is some narrow path either, it's a big courtyard. Taking a deep breath, Hannah controlled to step forward and pull out the spiral sword from Gunda's chest. After pulling the sword, she didn't step back to make space. Instead, she swung her longsword at Gunda, watching the stamina bar drop and getting used to the rhythm of her attacks. Each slash sprayed out blackish purple blood. This boss isn't even awake yet, why are you hitting it? Isn't that just wasting stamina? Zack complained from the side. I'm just getting a feel for it, can't I? Besides, I'm keeping an eye on the stamina bar, Hannah replied. But what happened next took Hannah by surprise. When Gunda finally stood up, the boss's health bar that appeared on the screen had already dropped a bit. Oh wow, you just got lucky. Zack was shocked, he didn't even know that was possible. What do you mean lucky? That's called knowing the game mechanics, Hannah snorted. Of course, she hadn't known about this trick beforehand, but that didn't stop her from bragging. And as everyone knows, when a player starts showing off, their IQ tends to drop, so she didn't get to enjoy her moment for long. With a loud thud, a deep sound came from the speakers. Still lost in her self-praise, Hannah didn't notice that Gunda had already woken up. He slammed his halberd into the ground, sending her flying. Wait, what? I'm wearing armor, how is the damage this high? Her eyes went wide as she watched get knocked back. What was this? Why did her health bar suddenly drop by a third? Sure, she was lasting longer than when she played the useless class earlier. But all it did was change from dying in 2 hits to dying in 3. What's the difference? Watching her health drop and Gunda still charging at her, Hannah felt her worldview collapse. Was this armor basically useless? Not that the boss cared about her feelings. His slow-looking walk suddenly closed the distance in an instant, and like a tiger pouncing, Gunda swung his halberd again. Hannah instinctively raised her shield, and instantly regretted it. Because when Zack played as the useless class, he had also tried blocking with a shield. It ended terribly. The stamina bar drained insanely fast, and the flimsy wooden shield couldn't fully block the damage, it only reduced it. The reduced damage was basically like going from 100 to 50. If you died in 2 hits before, you might survive 4 after blocking. But this time Hannah was surprised. Her shield completely blocked Gunda's attack. She didn't lose a single point of health. I'm invincible, so this is the real secret to winning. Gunda hit her twice in a row, and she still hadn't lost any health. Hannah was thrilled. Too thrilled to notice her stamina bar. Her shield was still up, and she hadn't even finished speaking, when Gunda suddenly dashed forward and unleashed 2 sweeping attacks. Her already low stamina bar was wiped out in an instant. Her character staggered, unable to move, and Gunda's right hand shot forward. Hannah watched as her character was lifted into the air by the halberd like a broken doll. Her health hit 0 instantly. You died, the same words, turning from red to black and white. Hannah went silent. You're doing it wrong. In this game, stamina is more important than health. If you run out, it's basically game over. Blocking with a shield might stop damage, but it uses twice as much stamina as rolling. And weren't you going to parry? Why just block? Zack gave his commentary. The only thing that surprised him was that even with the knight class, her defense didn't seem much better at all. To put it simply, the useless guy before was like soft tofu. Now, after choosing the knight and putting on armor, he's just become old tofu. Sure, the second kind is a bit harder, but it's still tofu, the kind that breaks with a single touch. Sitting on the stool, Hannah's face darkened at Zack's after-the-fact analysis. If you're so good, why don't you try? Fine, I'll show you what I can do. Zack sat back down, already picturing his upcoming fight with Eudex Gunda in his head. End of the chapter, you died. That same familiar death screen, with those 2 big words. And at the same time, Hannah's happy voice came from the side. That's it. Seeing that Gunda's HP had only dropped by about 1/3, Hannah couldn't help but laugh. In front of the computer, Zack's face was blank. He had realized that reality was very different from his imagination. In his head, dodging attacks with rolls and countering with perfect parries should have been smooth, just like the gameplay demo from the online showcase. But when it came to actually playing, it wasn't much different from when he used the useless guy before. Facing the massive Gunda, an inexplicable pressure came over him as soon as the fight began. Even though he told himself to fight while retreating and keep an eye on his stamina bar. When the battle actually started, he completely panicked. Facing Gunda's raised arm attack, the only thing he did was mash the roll button like crazy. The worst part was, sometimes he rolled too early, wasting stamina and still not dodging the hit. As for parrying, the cost was 2 swigs from his Estus flask, and he still failed. He turned to look at Hannah, who was grinning. Zack silently stood up from his chair, smiling too. "Your turn." Hannah's smile froze instantly. 1 life each, the two of them took turns challenging Gunda. In between, Hannah boldly suggested an idea. Since close combat against Gunda felt way too oppressive, why not try long range? So a class called Sorcerer entered their sights. They made the character and checked the skills, 1 soul arrow, 1 great soul arrow. Just from the names, they sounded powerful. And the damage really was high. Each hit took a decent chunk out of Gunda's HP. But the accuracy aside, at least there was a lock-on button. The casting speed was ridiculously slow. And while Gunda looked huge and his swings seemed a bit sluggish, once you put some distance between you, his gap-closing ability was insane. A massive leaping smash, a quick dash and sweep. These moves taught the casting sorcerer exactly what it means to be rushed down by a warrior. That's when Hannah realized why, even though the sorcerer is a magic class, they still start with a short sword and a metal round shield. There was also a pyromancer class. Throwing fireballs looked stylish, but the same problem remained: casting was slow. And they were just as fragile. More than once, Gunda sent her flying to the grave mid-fireball with a single leaping smash. Hannah and Zack tried every class 1 by 1, and found that the knight was still the most practical. At least it had more room for mistakes, and its attack power wasn't bad either. As for starting gifts, the ones they found most useful so far were the ring that boosts max HP, the goddess's blessing that fully restores health, and the black firebombs. The rest might be useful later, but for now, they did nothing to help defeat Eudex's Gunda. After more than 10 combined deaths, they also came to understand one of Dark Souls' golden rules. Don't get greedy. One of the most important things in the game is the stamina bar. No stamina basically means you're a sitting duck. In the game, almost every action costs stamina: normal attacks, parries, running, rolling, blocking. If you drain it completely, it refills even slower than usual. So when attacking, you have to keep the right rhythm. If you get greedy and empty your stamina bar when the boss counterattacks, you'll have no choice but to take the hit. When it came to burial items, they both agreed on one thing: pick the black firebomb. It was hard to hit Eudex's Gunda with it, but once it hit, it dealt 120 damage in one go. You started with 5 black firebombs. If all of them landed and you added a slash or 2, you could take away half of Gunda's HP right away. After being taught a hard lesson by Gunda many times, Hannah and Zack finally felt like they had found the right way to beat him. Fight while backing away, make full use of items, and keep the stamina bar in check. When facing attacks that were hard to dodge with rolls, just block them with a great shield. This time, they managed to cut Gunda's HP in half, while only using up 1 black firebomb. Zack still had 3 Estus left. Victory's right in front of us, come on, play it safe. Hannah, watching from the side, couldn't help getting a little excited. I know, Zack replied, eyes locked on Gunda's moves on the screen. But the next second, Gunda suddenly crouched down and stopped moving. Zack stared in shock. A huge mass of black, unknown matter suddenly burst out of Gunda's body. The black stuff twisted and flowed like tar, weaving together into vine-like shapes. The vines spread and tangled across Gunda's back, finally turning into a horned, clawed monster that looked part dragon, part snake. Its scarlet eyes locked straight onto the player character. The transformed Gunda was even taller than before. Second phase. Why does the very first boss have a second phase? Before Zack could react, the beast swung a claw, cutting away 1/3 of his HP. Before he could back off and heal, it charged at him, wiping out the rest of his health. The second phase Gunda not only had new moves but was way more aggressive. Damn you, Lucas, is this even meant for players? No wonder in the online demo they only showed half the fight. This starting area boss has a second phase. Zack's voice came out of the room, filled with despair. In short, his guard was broken. The truth was, Iudex Gunda ranked near the bottom of Dark Souls bosses. In terms of difficulty, he wasn't even on the list. Some tough normal enemies were stronger. His attacks were very clear and easy to read, and he didn't have any tricky patterns. That made his moves easy to dodge and easy to parry, which is why he was called Parry Teacher Gunda. But for players completely new to Souls games, this guy was definitely unforgettable. Because damn it, he was just too hard. You came in fired up, ready to help with the grand mission of linking the fire, and ended up getting schooled by the old gatekeeper Gunda for half the night. Who could take that? The only comfort for players was that in online mode, whenever you went to fight the crystal lizard or Gunda, you could see bloodstains on the ground showing that countless others had died just like you. End of the chapter. Zack sat in front of the computer, controlling the knight, AAA. After about half an hour of playing, the computer was now firmly in Zack's control. After all, if you die every 2 or 3 minutes and switch turns, the seat doesn't even have time to get warm. Of course, there was another important reason. Hannah had made a discovery. Watching someone else suffer and suffering yourself are two completely different feelings. She was sitting cross-legged in a big chair, a small bowl on her lap filled with a plastic bag and freshly washed grapes. "Oh no, just a little bit more. What a pity," Hannah said while looking at the grey screen on Zack's monitor. But the smile on her face didn't look like she was feeling sorry at all. Respawning at the bonfire, Zack didn't say anything. He just rolled twice on the spot, then set off again to challenge Iudex Gunda. He had to admit, he was starting to feel this game had some strange charm. At first, when Gunda beat him down, he felt a bit discouraged. Especially after seeing Gunda's second phase, he almost lost it. But as he kept trying, getting more and more used to the fight, and watching Gunda's health bar drop lower each time, it gave him a strange sense of satisfaction. Getting killed by Gunda didn't seem as hard to accept as before. It's just dying in a game, what's the big deal? When he entered Firelink's shrine again, compared to his early panic rolling and brainless parrying, Zack's playstyle was now much more solid. He used his shield to block Gunda's attacks without taking damage, and managed his green stamina bar carefully so it wouldn't run out. Then, whenever there was an opening after Gunda's attack, he'd sneak in a couple of swings. After dying almost 10 times, Zack had basically learned all of Gunda's moves and timings for both phases. When Gunda transformed into his second phase, Zack stepped in to slash twice, then backed off steadily. He attacked carefully, rolled away, tested for openings. The boss's health dropped lower and lower, and with one final slash, Iudex Gunda's health bar hit 0. Zra! With a sharp, pained roar from the pus of man, the massive boss twisted, collapsed with a crash, and turned to dust. At the same time, a small flame rose on the screen, as if it had been lit. Through the armor, the knight's skin could be faintly seen glowing like tiny sparks. Not only was his missing health restored, it actually went up even higher. After defeating the boss, he had entered Ember form. Nice, I did it. Zack clenched his fist excitedly in front of the computer. He had to say, the moment he beat Gunda felt amazing. That's it, you're done already. Hannah was surprised, though her tone carried a hint of disappointment. This Gunda's nothing. Before I just didn't know the game. Now if I fight him again, I can beat him easily, Zack said proudly, standing at the bonfire that appeared after defeating Gunda. He felt like a crab, walking sideways with confidence. If he could take down this powerful boss, who could possibly stop him on his path of linking the fire? The only small regret was that he still wasn't very good at parrying. When fighting Gunda, he had only pulled it off 2 or 3 times. It was super rewarding. If successful, he could go straight into a riposte and take off a huge chunk of health. But if he failed, he'd get smacked away instantly. So he decided to stick with the safer option of holding his shield to block. "Stop showing off and hurry up to see what's next," Hannah said as she popped 2 big grapes into Zach's mouth as a reward. "What's the rush? I have something more important to do right now." After resting at the bonfire and refilling his Estus flasks, Zach didn't push open the big door ahead. Instead, he turned back the way he came. "What are you doing?" Hannah asked, puzzled. "Revenge. I'm going to take down that big lizard that killed me the first time," Zach said, overflowing with confidence. Right now, he was nothing like the clueless rookie from before. If he could beat Gunda, was he really supposed to be afraid of one elite monster? Could a small monster really be harder than a boss? With that thought in mind, Zach headed back to the cemetery of ash. Following the narrow path, he soon reached his target. Engage, roll, raise shield. Then he turned into yet another bloodstain on the ground for the next player to see. Respawning at the bonfire, Zach stared at the thousands of souls he'd earned from beating Eudex's Gunda now gone, and his embered state reverted to normal. He went silent. What just happened? Looking at his revived character, Zach felt a little lost. He had gone in full of confidence to face the crystal lizard that had taken his first death earlier. But he quickly realized that all the tricks he'd learned from fighting Eudex's Gunda didn't work here at all. Its attacks were faster, and a single combo could drain his entire stamina bar. Its attack power was no less than Gunda's either. Even after using 3 Estus flasks, he hadn't taken off half its health before dying himself. Why did it feel even harder than Gunda? Was it just his imagination? After respawning, Zach decided to give it another shot, grab his dropped souls and fight again. But after he backed away, the lizard rolled into him, instantly draining his stamina. While he was staggered, it landed a 3-hit combo that left him completely helpless. "I don't think this is something you can handle right now," Hannah said from the side. "Yeah, looks like I'd better leave it alone for now." Zach respawned again, stepped into the crystal lizard's area, grabbed his dropped souls, and ran for it. Luckily, unlike bosses, once you leave its aggro range, it won't chase you endlessly. "Let's go see what's ahead. Our mission is to link the fire, remember?" Zach adjusted his mindset. The crystal lizard was just a side distraction. The main story was what really mattered. Now it was time to truly begin the journey to link the fire. But how do you link the fire, anyway? And what about the Lords of Cinder mentioned in the trailer? Was Eudex's Gunda one of them? After all, beating him had put him into an embered state. Back in the courtyard, Zach pushed open the large door at the back. Climbing up, he encountered some regular hollow enemies along the way. He took them down easily, regaining the confidence he'd lost earlier. This was the real game experience. He had beaten Eudex's Gunda and earned the right to link the fire. The crystal lizard was nothing but a small hiccup. Moving upward, he soon saw a striking circular building, grand and imposing like a cathedral. Through its wide-open doors, he stepped into a round area, similar to a shrine. It felt almost like an opera house. Up on a ring-shaped platform stood 5 thrones. 4 were empty, only one was occupied by a frail, elderly man. In the very center of the shrine stood a silver-haired girl in a black robe, her hair flowing to her waist, wearing a mysterious metal blindfold. It was the same girl who had appeared in the game's trailer. End of the chapter. Inside the Firelink shrine, Zach only saw 3 people so far. The mysterious girl with a metal blindfold, standing by an unlit bonfire. The frail old man sitting on a throne, and a man with a sword and shield crouching on the stone steps. Naturally, Zach went straight to talk to the girl in the middle. It wasn't because she was a female NPC, and not because she had a great figure that could spark imagination, even with a blindfold on. It was simply because she was the NPC shown in the game's trailers, nothing more. "Welcome to the bonfire. Ashen one without fire, I am the fire keeper. I tend the bonfire and serve you. If you need help to find the lords who abandoned their thrones, just say the word." Her voice was charming, but after the dialogue ended and the game menu appeared, Zach quickly figured out her role. She was basically just there to let players level up. After a short chat, Zach counted up his souls, 3, 000 from killing Eudex Gunda, plus the ones from small enemies along the way. He had enough for 3 levels, and after thinking for a moment, he put them all into health. Stamina was also important, but he felt that in the early game, health was key. It gave more room for mistakes. Wandering around the shrine a bit, Zack's attention was caught by the frail old man on the throne. After talking to him, Zack learned his name, Ludolith, and found out he was a lord of Cinder. The empty thrones nearby had once belonged to other lords of Cinder. From their conversation, Zack also learned an important detail. To keep the flame burning, a lord of Cinder had to burn themselves. No wonder the other 4 thrones are empty. The lords are literally firewood, Zack muttered. Now he had a decent grasp of the main plot. From the trailers, the main character was, well, basically unburnable trash, no, an unkindled ash. The world was about to fall into darkness, and to keep it going, the flame had to be fed. The Lords of Cinder were the fuel for that fire. That was their fate. But of course, no one wanted to be firewood, so they all ran off. Only Ludolith stayed behind, for reasons unknown. The hero's job was to hunt down the other 4 pieces of firewood and bring them back to burn. That was Zack's current understanding of Dark Souls' story. Whether there would be any twists later, he had no idea. Moving on, he came to a staircase and spoke to the man sitting there with his head down, sword and shield on his back. "Oh, so you're one of the ones who can't die too. I'm just like you, an ashen nobody who's good for nothing, and can't even manage to die properly. Pathetic, isn't it? A bunch of people who can't die running around looking for the lords, thinking they can bring them back to those moldy old thrones. Those people are heroes who linked the flame. How could trash like us possibly do it?" "You think so too, right?" Gesture learned, despair. After the conversation, Zack unlocked a new despair gesture. But seriously, what was with all that negativity? Was this NPC's whole purpose just to spread bad vibes? Zack explored the shrine a bit more and found a blacksmith and an old woman selling goods. The blacksmith could strengthen weapons and reallocate Estus flasks. Zack immediately switched his blue focus flask into another healing one, turning his 3 flasks into 4. As for upgrading weapons, he needed 2 titanite shards, but he only had 1, so no upgrade yet. There seemed to be a path on the roof, but the door was locked and he didn't have the key. Outside the shrine, besides the lifeless hollows sitting around, he also spotted a small path. But at the door stood an NPC in ragged clothes, holding a katana. "That katana looks so cool. I wonder if we can get it by killing him. Is he one of those enemies that drop weapons? I mean, there's no way the game expects you to beat everything with just this knight's sword, right?" Hannah said from the side. Earlier on the small path in the shrine, they'd found a broken longsword, but judging by its stats, it was even worse than the useless club that the unkindled guy had. You know, that might actually be possible. Zack wasn't just tempted, he was ready to act. In most ARPG games, the starting gear you get when you spawn is usually replaced by something better after you leave the beginner area, often by killing a boss. Killing Eudex Gunda earlier gave him a coiled sword, but that was just an item, a kind of warp point. But this katana guy sitting in the corner, he definitely looked like the type of NPC that would drop a weapon. Or maybe he was guarding that small room behind him, which could have a new weapon inside for the player. Looking at katana guy in front of him, Zack charged forward bravely. "Zog!" Through his headphones, he heard his character's pained cry. In just 1 Iaido triple slash, his health bar went down like it was made of tofu. Instant kill. This guy's even stronger than Gunda, Zack was stunned. And this was with him playing as a knight. He was wearing armor. Sure, Gunda could take him down in 3 or 4 hits too, but Gunda's swings were slow. Even if you kept rolling, at most you'd get hit once. But this katana guy, his Iaido combo was so fast Zack didn't even have time to react before his health was wiped out completely. Watching his character respawn at the newly lit Firelink Shrine bonfire, Zack stayed silent. After a short pause, Hannah said, "Let's just follow the main story for now. Maybe this guy is like the Crystal Lizard, an elite enemy that's really hard to beat, and the main story later will be much easier." Was that really the case? If Zack hadn't been destroyed by both the Crystal Lizard and Katana Guy, he might have believed that, and even felt confident. But now, he wasn't so sure anymore. Using the Firelink Shrine bonfire, Zack walked to the next story area, the High Wall of Lothric. Pushing open the gate, both Zack and Hannah couldn't help but feel amazed at the sight. Sure, they'd seen the concept art and the promo material before, but actually walking through it in-game was a whole different experience. Through the hazy mist in the distance, they could faintly see the majestic royal city. It was huge, but after the moment of awe passed, Zack felt a bit uneasy. Because up to now, he still hadn't found a map. Could it be that this game didn't have a map system at all? Lighting the bonfire at the gate with a bit of nervousness, Zack began exploring the High Wall of Lothric. End of the chapter. After watching for so long, your hands must be itching, right? Back at the campfire, Zack glanced at Hannah, who was busy cleaning up grape skins beside him. Hearing him, Hannah looked at the game screen and shot back without thinking, "My hands are itching, but my skin isn't." Zack sighed and went back to controlling his character, exploring further. They entered the High Wall of Lothric. Compared to the Firelink Shrine and the Cemetery of Ash earlier, this place was way more complex. And since there was no map, he had no clue where to go. But there was an even bigger problem. This part of the game was basically like chopping vegetables and melons, except, well, he was the vegetable. On the High Wall of Lothric, aside from the kneeling hollow mobs that just sat there like pilgrims and didn't fight back, pretty much every other enemy could kill him. And the worst part, these enemies didn't just rely on brute force like the Crystal Lizard, the Katana Guy, or Eudex Gunda. No, these guys had no sense of honor at all. It was common to turn a corner and get jumped by a mob with a short sword, who would chain combo him to death if his HP wasn't full. Sometimes, a careless move would pull 2 or 3 enemies at once. When they swarmed him, it somehow felt harder than fighting Gunda. One enemy in particular, a dog-like hollow, was fast, agile, and hit hard. And then there were the fire crossbow mobs hiding in wall gaps. They wouldn't move when he passed, but the moment he got into a fight below, they'd start shooting him in the back. There were also enemies hiding behind boxes, waiting for him to turn his back so they could stab him from behind. It was an ARPG, but Zack was getting the same paranoid feeling he had when playing Outlast, never knowing what kind of trap was waiting around the corner. Still, if it were only these dishonorable mobs, it wouldn't be too bad. They were mostly weak, and one-on-one they weren't hard to deal with as long as he didn't get careless. But as Zack explored more of the high wall, he ran into some real trouble. On the way to a watchtower, he came across a Lothric knight holding a sword and shield. This guy had even appeared in the trailer, though only as a background prop to show how mobs could get parried and executed. Finally, an enemy who can face me head-on, one-on-one. Looking at the knight, Zack's eyes lit up with excitement. Come on, let's have a fair fight. Meeting in a narrow path, the brave one wins. Zack could feel his blood boiling. After being ganged up on so many times, he was finally going to have a proper duel. The knight clearly noticed him too, taking up a stance. Zack advanced, the knight retreated. They tested each other's moves. Without realizing it, Zack stepped into the dark interior of the watchtower. Suddenly, crash, a box broke behind him. A dagger-wielding mob leapt out of nowhere and stabbed him in the back. Splat! Blood sprayed, and before he could recover, the shameless mob kicked him forward. The knight took the chance to bring his sword down in one clean strike. Zack dead. So much for one-on-one, you actually called for backup. Zack was completely stunned. You stay right there, don't you run, he shouted before respawning at the nearest bonfire. Back here again, this time he played smarter. He rolled several times to dodge the knight, went into the dark watchtower, found the monster that ambushed him before, killed it, and only then turned to face the knight. Let's use you to practice my parry skills. Time for you to see what a true hero of fire looks like. Zack raised his shield, stood still to draw the knight's attention, and prepared to train his parrying. First parry attempt, 1 flask down. Second parry attempt, 2 flasks down. By the third try, Zack sensed something was wrong. He gave up on parrying and decided to block first, then counterattack after the knight finished swinging. But instead of attacking normally, the Lothric knight bashed him with its shield. That bash wiped out his stamina bar instantly, just like getting his health bar drained, and his character froze from exhaustion. The knight calmly followed up with a chain of slashes, finishing him off and giving Zack another lesson in those 3 red words. Why do all the monsters after I beat Iudex Gunda feel like they do the same damage as him? Zack muttered, respawning at the bonfire. He had thought Iudex Gunda was supposed to be a tough fight, but the crystal lizard, the katana guy, and now this knight, each one felt ridiculously strong. Probably just the game's style, Hannah said beside him. Zack was speechless. The high wall of Lothric was crawling with even more types of enemies. By now he was completely sure of one thing. This was definitely a very hard game. Zack even felt that traveling through the map was harder than fighting the bosses. He could tell just by looking, these were enemies you didn't want to mess with. Zack decided to leave the knight alone for now and explore elsewhere. On a bridge packed with monsters, he was planning to lure them out one by one when a dragon suddenly swooped down from the sky and blasted the whole bridge with fire. Just like the other enemies on the bridge, Zack got to see the words, "You died," once again. After countless deaths and hardened experience, Zack finally made it to the watchtower room. But something felt strange. There were no enemies inside. And in the corner downstairs, there was even a treasure chest. A chest. Zack got closer and saw the open prompt pop up on the screen, his face lighting up with joy. Was it finally time to get some new gear? In most ARPGs, treasure chests meant good loot. Looking at the chest, Zack was already grinning. He pressed the button to open it, but what happened next left him stunned. Inside wasn't loot, it was a mouth lined with sharp teeth from top to bottom. A long tongue and 2 hands shot out, grabbing his character. What the hell? Zack jumped in his seat, nearly throwing his mouse. The chest's fangs clamped down on his character's head. Blood splattered everywhere as his character struggled, but the health bar drained in an instant. After a short struggle, the character went still. The screen faded to black, and those 3 blood-red words appeared in the center again. What the hell? The chest was a trap. Zack stared wide-eyed, completely dumbfounded. But he quickly respawned at the bonfire, ready to head back, not just to recover his souls, but to get revenge. From his past experience, enemies that relied on cheap tricks were usually pretty weak. Back in the chest room, 30 seconds later. The cramped room made it impossible to move around. Watching his character get grabbed by the mimic and stuffed into its mouth, Zack set down his mouse. Patting his chest, he told himself this wasn't chickening out. This was a gentleman's revenge can wait 10 years. Just like the earlier shortcut, or fighting the katana guy and the Lothric knight, it was all about dying a few times, learning the enemy's moves, and then beating them easily, but it wasn't worth the trouble. Still, the frustration in his chest made him quietly shut down his PC. He decided that was enough for today. If he kept going, he was afraid his brand new keyboard and mouse might end up in pieces. Right at that moment, the phone on his desk rang. One glance showed it was his old friend Ben. "Zack, what are you doing for National Day?" "I'm screwed. Just checked into the hotel and my boss is an idiot who sends people on a work trip during the holidays." Zack replied, playing a game. "That Dark Souls we saw at the convention just came out today. Have you tried it?" 2 seconds later, Ben replied, "Not yet. Is it good? If it's not, I won't buy it." That made Zack think back to the reason he once played Outlast, so he quickly replied, "Epic story, amazing graphics, great combat feel, and the gameplay can be summed up in 4 words, slice through like butter." That night, logging into his girlfriend Hannah's Nebula Games account, Zack even bought a copy of Dark Souls for Ben. When he saw the reply later, he couldn't help but laugh. "So this is your slice through like butter?" Even though it was just a text message, Zack could already picture Ben's expression through the screen. End of the chapter. It wasn't just Ben, Zack, and Hannah. Every player who bought Dark Souls right at launch was completely bewildered. Some even wondered if they were playing the game wrong, because it felt way too cruel. Dark Souls players basically went through 4 emotional stages. First came the excitement before starting, full of joy and eager to pass on the so-called Flame of Hope and become the Fire Keeper. Then came the Crystal Lizard and Eudex Gunda, who beat them so badly they didn't know what was going on. But after stubbornly pushing through and finally defeating Gunda, players regained their confidence and looked forward to the journey ahead. Then they reached the high wall of Lothric and started questioning their life choices. Because once there they fully understood the game's tone, except for the Crystal Lizards, nicknamed Porsches by players. Anything that could move and was an enemy could kill them. Sure, you could kill small enemies in 3 or 4 hits, maybe 5. But they could kill you just as easily. In the game, you felt like you were made of glass, shatter on contact. And if you wore a full set of armor, that just meant you were glass wrapped in a plastic bag. Basically, any monster could end you. Even the weakest-looking hollows. Face 2 or 3 of them at once without skill, and you'd still die in the street. In the game, players can also fully experience the level design that's packed with bad intentions. Just after taking down a group of enemies and happily moving forward, you turn the corner and a hollow with a short sword comes charging at you. When you see there's only one enemy ahead and think it's no big deal, there are actually a few more hiding in the shadows, waiting to ambush you. And what really crosses the line for many players is that the very first treasure chest you see in Lothric High Wall turns out to be a mimic. Almost every player who encounters this thing for the first time ends up losing their life. And there are plenty more traps like that in the game. Fire-breathing dragons on bridges, Lothric knights in corridors, pus of man on rooftops, and spear knights waiting inside rooms. Eventually, you reach a courtyard full of corpses, where a big, axe-wielding winged knight shows you what cruelty really means. The second wave of players had it a little better thanks to the game's message and bloodstain system. Players can leave messages in certain spots to warn others. And when a player dies, a bloodstain appears on the ground where they fell, serving as a warning for those who come after. So when later players reached the mimic room and saw the floor covered in bloodstains, they usually got suspicious. But for the first-time pioneers, there was no such luck. Everything they faced was unknown. Of course, the veterans would also leave messages. The only problem is, some are true and some are fake. For example, in the mimic room, a player who got tricked before might leave a warning saying, "Beware of chest," making later players more cautious. But others would be more mischievous and leave something vague like, "Great treasure ahead." Even though messages can be rated up or down, sometimes it doesn't really help much. For impatient players who don't think too much, they just end up following in the footsteps of those before them. On the flip side, the message system is one of the main reasons many players keep going in Dark Souls. Because from these messages, they realize they're not the only ones suffering in this world. It's just human nature. If you suffer alone, it feels much heavier and lonelier. But if you know there are others going through the same pain, maybe even worse than you, it somehow becomes easier to endure. Of course, just because it eases your mind doesn't mean you can skip the suffering. In this game, if you think you can beat an enemy, you might not be able to. And if you think you can't beat one, you definitely can't. One of the most soul-crushing parts of the game is that once you finally kill an enemy, it will respawn if you rest or travel at a bonfire. And then there are your souls, your money and experience in the game. In other ARPGs, these are valuable treasures. In Dark Souls, they can feel like a burden. If you're carrying a large number of souls, but not enough to level up, it becomes a heavy load on your mind. Because if you die, you drop all of them, and if you die again before picking them up, they're gone forever. After suffering both physically and mentally in Lothric, many players head back to Firelink Shrine to admire the Firekeeper's figure and imagine the beautiful face behind her mask. Hearing her gentle voice lines in the game instantly brings back their will to link the fire. The only annoying thing is that right outside Firelink Shrine, there's the Katana Guy, Master. And inside the shrine, sitting on the stairs, there's Hawkwood, always spreading negativity. Some players, already frustrated after repeated beatings, snap when they see Hawkwood talking gloom again and cut him down on the spot. If they're not going to link the fire, fine, but why spread so much negativity every day? You might not be able to take down the Katana Master outside, but you can at least deal with this guy. After 3 hits, he turns hostile, and players soon realize they really can't deal with him. Rolling, drinking Estus, parrying, this discouraged bro has mastered it all. Seeing the dumbfounded players, discouraged bro grins wickedly. I hear you call me discouraged bro, huh? Today I'll show you that the name has another meaning. And once he's hostile, players don't even get a chance to make amends. Show up at Firelink Shrine and he'll hunt you down on sight. What? You say it's a misunderstanding? Once I'll say it's a slip of the hand. Twice, maybe you were just messing around. But 3 swings in a row and you still call it a misunderstanding. Come on, let's dance in the street together. Also, if you hit the blacksmith or the old lady who sells items, they won't turn hostile and will respawn later. But the blacksmith will straight up refuse to serve you, and if you kill the old lady once, she'll still sell you stuff, but at, well, a special price. You can technically atone later in the sewers of another map using souls. But right now, players have no clue about that. And even if they did, it wouldn't help much. Never mind whether they can even get there. The number of souls needed to atone is a pain they can't bear. Many players end up deleting their save out of despair. If it happens early in the game, it's definitely a feature that scares players away. But for players who have already beaten Eudex Gunda and reached Firelink Shrine, a certain trait has already quietly awakened. They might feel despair, but at the same time, there's this strange thrill. After all, being able to attack NPCs and trigger follow-up consequences, this kind of feature is pretty rare in other games. Of course, besides the players who have awakened to that trait, there are plenty of others who came ready to kindle the first flame, only to get schooled and rage quit, venting their anger on forums and communities. Damn, Lucas is straight up taking revenge on the world. Dark Souls difficulty is just malicious. +1, players who don't like suffering should never buy this. I'm mentally broken. I thought it was going to be a hack-and-slash game, and I guess it is, except the monsters are the ones hacking me. It's an old joke, but I still have to say it. Warrior of love, ha 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 ha. Many players who quit after being crushed warn those who haven't bought it yet. But some players argue back. Their reasoning is simple. They want more people to jump in and experience the same pain they did, just like with Outlast back in the day. Of course, not all of them are just trolling or trying to mess with others. Some players who have unlocked a certain special trait are genuinely drawn in by Dark Souls' art design, its mysterious world building, and its tense, thrilling boss fights. To be fair, the Nebula Games platform tags for Dark Souls clearly say it's high difficulty. Compared to most ARPGs, it's just a little more hardcore, but there's no need to exaggerate it so much, right? Yeah, when did Lucas ever say it was a hack-and-slash game? Didn't he say it's all about how players approach it? +1, it's an action game. Those who get it. Those who don't, well, nothing we can do. I strongly recommend everyone try it out. The Firekeeper in Firelink Shrine is so beautiful. I hereby declare she's my wife. Bro above, your wife is awesome. Still, for now, the players who complain and criticize make up the bigger crowd. End of the chapter. Players online all had different opinions, and the argument quickly went from text debates to video debates. Some gameplay videos of Dark Souls began to spread, including live streams from players who played Dark Souls as soon as it was released. One player uploaded a fight against the first boss, Eudex Gunda, and it looked very different from the live demo shown at the original online launch event. In this video, Eudex Gunda looked absolutely intimidating. His halberd spun and twisted in his hands, and with a scream from the player, the health bar was instantly wiped out. It was a perfect display of what too brutal to watch really means. There were also videos of players being flattened by the crystal lizard or instantly killed by Uchigatana Guy's EI/. But before these kinds of videos could gain traction, more players began uploading new ones. Once again, they were fighting Eudex Gunda. But this time, the outcome was completely different. In the game, the player wore a knight's suit of armor, shield in one hand and sword in the other. When Gunda swung down his weapon, the player raised their shield slightly with their left hand. The blow was deflected, and they immediately followed up with a riposte. Throughout the whole fight, even during Gunda's second phase, he didn't land a single hit. It was as if the player was toying with him. Same boss, completely different results. This left players completely puzzled. So what's going on? Is this game hard or not? It was the same on streaming platforms. Some streamers died miserably, screaming in frustration. But there were also streamers who, right from the Cemetery of Ash, easily toyed with Gunda, Uchigatana Guy, and even the Lothric Knight. Of course, new players didn't realize that, while some of these videos did feature naturally gifted players, a lot of them were actually from people who had practiced for a long time, or had died countless times to gain experience. With so many different examples and the game being newly released, there was a big gap in player knowledge, and no clear consensus was formed. This only made even more players curious. Just what kind of game is this? Some even thought of Outlast. They felt like maybe someone was trying to pull off something big. But that only made them more curious. After all, people are naturally curious about the unknown, especially when it's just a game. And Dark Souls didn't seem like a horror game like Outlast. In Outlast, you might not dare to step into the asylum's front door, but in Dark Souls, are you telling me you don't dare to link the fire? With that thought in mind, countless players jumped headfirst into the Dark Souls pit. But when this second wave of players got into the game, they were stunned. Just like the very first batch of players. The moment these new players started, they immediately felt the game's deep malice. Even with the advice and death clips left behind by veteran players, countless people still experienced firsthand just how satisfying and punishing dying in this game could be. They looked at the tall, imposing Uncle Gunda, remembering the videos where someone took him down in just a few moves. Then, when it was their turn, they realized they were the ones being cut down like vegetables. That firekeeper girl they'd seen online before, the one that made their hearts itch with curiosity, needless to say, they wanted to meet her. But to do that, they had to take down Eudek's Gunda. Otherwise, they wouldn't even get to touch the massive bronze gates of Firelink Shrine. High difficulty, no minimap, and a level design full of traps and malice. Many players who were drawn in earlier quickly joined the chorus of complaints. "I'm done, this game is way too hard. Why is there no difficulty option? Why no minimap? Those of you saying this game is easy, don't you feel even a little guilty? I died 10 times in 1 hour, how is that even possible? I thought this was gonna be a hack-and-slash game, but now you're telling me I'm the veggie." Inside Nebula Games' office. Even though it was the National Day holiday, most of the core members of the project team had stayed at the company to work overtime on their own initiative. After all, Dark Souls was Nebula Games' first big project, and everyone cared a lot about how it would do. Of course, the generous overtime pay and perks were also part of the reason, so people were happy to work extra hours. Mr. Lucas, a lot of players in the game community, on the company's official account, and on your own account are talking about how hard Dark Souls is, Hector from the project team said with some concern. "Yeah, are we going to add a difficulty selection system later? And a mini-map," Rachel and Anna added. "There's no need to change the systems or difficulty for now, and it's too early to make that call," Lucas said with a smile. Then he turned to the customer service department. "How's the data looking?" "We can't get third-party platform stats yet, but on Nebula Games' own platform, in the first 24 hours after launch, the game sold 495,721 copies. Only 24,916 have been refunded so far. 40% of those were because the game's too hard, and the other 60% for various other reasons. Since it was Nebula Games' first big title, and they'd been promoting and building hype for quite a while. Combined with the company's good reputation, first-day sales of nearly 500,000 copies weren't all that surprising. And thanks to discount coupons, most players chose to buy it on the Nebula Games platform. As for refunds, compared to most games, Dark Souls' numbers were indeed higher. But this was within Lucas' expectations. In fact, the refund rate for Dark Souls was even lower than for their previous game, Outlast. Was Dark Souls a game for everyone? Obviously not. In fact, no game is really for everyone. Games are a deeply personal experience. Some people love big AAA titles, others prefer mobile games, and some enjoy browser games. So what kind of game you like really comes down to your own taste. Dark Souls, however, is absolutely the kind of game where, if you slow down and let yourself sink into it, you can feel its charm. Its high difficulty is deeply tied to that charm. From the boss fights to the level design to the combat system, and even the game's art style, everything is built around that. These things are all closely tied together. If you lower the game's difficulty, it's like cutting a link in the middle of a chain, the whole chain breaks. That would be a loss that outweighs the gain. Besides, compared to what online players are saying, Lucas, as the developer, can see the real situation of Dark Souls more clearly through the backend server data. And right now, things are looking much better than Lucas had imagined. Also, besides the critics, there are plenty of players speaking up for the game. At the moment, it's basically a 4-to-6 ratio, and more importantly, players' online time hasn't been dropping. In fact, among the first batch of players, 70% have already played past the 2-hour refund window. That really surprised Lucas. Clearly, players in this parallel world have a higher M factor than he had predicted when researching the market. These numbers made Lucas feel no pressure at all. Now it was just a matter of time, letting the fine wine of Dark Souls slowly spread its aroma so that more players could catch its scent. Of course, some proper guidance was still needed during this period. Otherwise, it could still affect Dark Souls' performance. End of the chapter. Lucas remained calm as ever, waiting for the right moment to guide the public opinion among online players. Because he could clearly see the game's real data. But for many designers in the industry who had been following Nebula games, they had no access to this data. They could only judge Dark Souls based on online reviews and the game's surface-level content, and they all had mixed feelings. As expected, while Lucas has been dominating the indie game scene, this is still his first time developing a large-scale game, and he can't quite handle it perfectly yet. I wouldn't say that. The art design is flawless, the combat system is great, and while we don't know much about the story yet, judging from the world building it shouldn't be bad. The main issue is the numbers and balance. Yeah, I think so too. Dark Souls has really good visuals and art quality, but the difficulty just feels way too high. It's not just that, the level design and little details matter too. There's no minimap in the game, and you can't adjust the difficulty. This time Lucas is being way too stubborn. The player rating for Dark Souls has already dropped to 8.3. Compared to Lucas' previous games, that's a world of difference. Yeah, this might be his lowest rated game ever, right? This time Lucas has hit a real setback. Even if it's not a total disaster, with the size of Dark Souls marketing and production costs, it must be pretty painful. Actually, not necessarily. The main problem with Dark Souls right now is the difficulty and the small details in the gameplay. Later, if Lucas lowers the difficulty a bit and adds an option for different difficulty levels, things might turn out differently. But in the end, they were still a step too slow. I guess a lot of game companies who released around the same time are feeling a little regret now. Before, Dark Souls had such strong promotion that they were worried it might affect their own games, but now Dark Souls is struggling. A lot of people in the industry are paying close attention to the designer of Dark Souls. Nebula Games had released several big hits before, but most of them were low-budget productions. As Nebula Games' first large-scale title, Dark Souls naturally drew a huge amount of attention. But right now, it's clearly surrounded by controversy. It might even fall short of expectations. This has made some game companies and designers start thinking differently. Before this, the two major studios Skynova and NetDragon had already announced clear release dates for their big VR projects, early December and mid-December. It was obvious they were ready for a head-on battle. And even though Nebula Games isn't a large game company, their string of successful indie games and the hype surrounding Dark Souls had still made many studios and designers avoid competing directly. After all, no one knew exactly what kind of game this would be, and if it turned out to be high quality. Wouldn't going up against it be like serving yourself up on a plate? But now, with how Dark Souls is performing, some designers and companies are rethinking things. Eagle Falcon Entertainment, a domestic studio focused on ARPG and action games. Their lead designer and head, Simmons, had also been closely watching Dark Souls. That's because his own ARPG project, Dawn of the Mind, was set to release soon. Unlike some companies that deliberately avoided Dark Souls, they had announced their release date long ago, 2 weeks after Dark Souls came out. But there was still some debate within the company over whether they should delay it. After all, if Dark Souls turned out to be truly high quality, then as another ARPG it might easily be overshadowed, hurting sales. But now the situation seemed much clearer. Right after the game launched, Simmons personally bought Dark Souls and gave it a serious try. And after playing it, he was shocked. Just like the players online complaining about the difficulty, Simmons got beaten down by the Eudex Gunda fight and the Crystal Lizard, and ended up quitting in defeat. He had only one thought: was there really nothing wrong with this game's difficulty? Did Lucas really not make any mistakes in the game's balancing? Sure, it's an ARPG, and even one leaning more toward action, but this difficulty was just way over the top. Especially after he looked online and found out that later on the game was full of nasty traps, and that the early parts were just a small taste of what was coming. At that moment, Simmons felt a bit disoriented. From the way Dark Souls was designed, he could more or less guess what Lucas had in mind. To make it into a hardcore ARPG. That's why Simmons thought Dark Souls would end up being a niche title without huge popularity. And based on current online player reviews, it really did seem to be heading in that direction. Then there's nothing more to say. At first, there was some worry that Dark Souls might turn into a huge hit, so there was hesitation. But now that the timing, the situation, and the people are all in place, not riding this wave would be a crime against myself. Very soon after Simmons made his decision, Mind Dawn began a high-profile publicity campaign. Not only them, Eagle Falcon Entertainment, and many other studios that had originally planned to release their games during this period, but held back because of Dark Souls' overwhelming publicity, also started warming up their promotions. After all, December has 2 huge monsters coming up. Even though they're VR titles, they will still have a noticeable impact on the PC market. And judging by Dark Souls' current player reputation, it's clearly a husky wearing a wolf's skin. The early marketing looked fierce, but once it came down to the real fight, it collapsed instantly. By the time their games launch, the reputation will probably be even worse. Meanwhile, inside Nebula Games, Lucas was discussing how to maintain Dark Souls heat with Ethan. Rachel and Anna, who had been keeping a close eye on the data, discovered something that got them excited. The player reviews for Dark Souls seemed to be slowly turning around. There were still plenty of angry players leaving low scores and complaining about the high difficulty in the forums. But according to Nebula Games' backend data, Rachel and Anna were thrilled to find that quite a few players who had left bad reviews hadn't quit right away. Instead, they kept playing. The longest batch already had over 12 hours of playtime. Most of these players even changed their low scores to higher ones. On the official community forum, many of them also stepped forward to change their tone and speak well of Dark Souls. This shift in attitude made Rachel and Anna both happy and puzzled. What happened to these players? Did Lucas cast some kind of spell on them? End of the chapter on the day Dark Souls went live and the day after. The players who entered the game mostly focused their discussions on just how absurdly difficult it was and how malicious the design felt. Many of them also flooded Lucas's official account and the game's platform page with protests. Although there were some players defending the game, the negative voices were still the majority. As a result, the score kept dropping. Now, 2 days later, there were still plenty of new players joining in and quitting quickly, adding their protests and curses to the pile. But more and more players began defending Dark Souls, and the game's score reflected this change. From its drop to 8.3, it had now climbed back to 8.5. Usually, a game's rating starts high and then falls, but Dark Souls was going up against the trend. This could only mean one thing: players who had left bad reviews were changing them. At the same time, on the game's official forum, many players who have been playing since day one started writing their own reviews and impressions of Dark Souls. One long post in particular drew thousands of replies and became a trending topic on the forum. In this post, the player shared their entire journey of experiencing Dark Souls. At first, I was just like most new players. The moment I entered the game, I got wrecked by the crystal lizard and beaten down by Eudex Gunda. I was so angry that I gave the game a 1-star rating right away, but now I've changed it back to 9 stars. I'm not sure if I'll change it again later, but based on how Dark Souls feels to me right now, I think it fully deserves that score. Just like Lucas said before, this is a very different kind of ARPG. What's the core of an ARPG? Character stats getting stronger and better gear. Dark Souls has that too, but it's different. Stats and gear are just support. The real core is us, the players. When I first faced Eudex Gunda, I kept getting destroyed. I couldn't even trigger his second phase. Back then, I thought this boss was impossible to beat. But after 2-3 tries, I started noticing something. His health bar was getting smaller every time. And when I finally defeated him, the feeling of achievement completely overwhelmed me. I never thought beating a beginner boss could feel this amazing. Looking back, I realized Gunda wasn't that hard after all. My stats and gear were still the same. I was the one who became stronger. And I don't mean my in-game character, I mean me, the player. No other ARPG has ever given me this feeling. And about the minimap, at first, I was so confused when I noticed there wasn't one, especially when I got to the high wall of Lothric and ran into all those nasty traps. But after exploring and dying so many times, I found that I had memorized every corner of the high wall. The entire map was cleverly connected with shortcuts that let you quickly reach other areas once unlocked. That made me appreciate just how well designed the map was. Think about it, how many ARPGs have maps we can actually remember clearly? Beating yourself, surpassing yourself, that's the charm I feel in Dark Souls. And if you think about it, the map and level design in Dark Souls isn't pure cruelty either. There are bonfires for saving your progress. All we need to do is make it to the next one using the limited Estus flasks we have, and then slowly make our way to the boss room. Holding out until the next bonfire, beating a boss that seems impossible, fighting through waves of enemies, that's what hooked me. There's nothing more satisfying than surpassing yourself, and Dark Souls delivers exactly that. This might not be a game everyone will like, but it's definitely not the garbage game some people claim it is. I just hope every player can take the time to truly experience this amazing game. When the first wave of players reached the high wall of Lothric, and some skilled action game players figured out how Dark Souls works, those players who had completely awakened to the game's essence just couldn't stop. These players who had died countless times and were still dying began posting advice and warnings for others. More and more posts like this started appearing on the forums and the official blog. Everyone described it in great detail, and almost everyone praised Dark Souls to the skis. As more and more people talked about what drew them to Dark Souls and what makes the game great, many players started to take a fresh look at the game. After all, the tendency to follow the crowd is something most people have. It's not that just because others say the game is great, you'll automatically think so too. But at least it makes players want to check it out more fairly before forming their own opinion. This even made some players who were about to quit decide to keep going. And when they finally beat Eudex Gunda, they truly felt the charm of Dark Souls. You could say Dark Souls is a very special game. It gives players a clear sense that they're slowly getting stronger. The game itself is built around a level-based progression design. The boss's attack patterns and the traps hidden in the map all follow patterns you can learn. Just like Gunda or the Katana guy, they all have a wind-up before an attack so players can react. Every enemy in Dark Souls is designed like this, which is why people call it a game about memorizing moves. Unlike pure action or fighting games, Dark Souls doesn't demand super fast reactions or split-second reflexes. It's more about learning and understanding the boss's patterns and mechanics. Once players learn them, beating the boss isn't that hard. This gives players a strong sense of real progress in the game. At first, you meet a monster and keep getting one-shotted without even touching it. But after dying over and over, you realize you can finally beat it. That's one of the core joys of Dark Souls. And after passing Gunda's trial and getting through the high wall of Lothric, the huge world of Dark Souls slowly unfolds before the players. The undead dragon on the bridge, the firekeeper everyone calls their waifu, and the legendary Lords of Cinder. All these things keep pulling players deeper in. End of the chapter. As players started looking at Dark Souls more objectively, the tone in the Dark Souls forums became much less toxic than before. At the same time, the game's ratings slowly started to go up, even though many players still bought it and then refunded it. But Lucas thought this was completely normal, because even though Dark Souls has a very unique kind of charm, not every player likes this kind of tough, hardcore challenge. For some players, Dark Souls is clearly not their kind of game. But for the ones who stick with it, after beating Gunda and getting through the high wall of Lothric, the unique flavor of the Souls series truly comes out, and they get completely hooked. And when it comes to spreading online, Dark Souls has blown up even more than Outlast did back in the day. The main reason is that before this, there wasn't any game quite like Dark Souls. Many players who experienced Dark Souls felt it was amazing and started recommending it to their friends, telling them to try it. Lucas released Dark Souls, you should give it a shot. What kind of game is it? Hack and slash, super fun. See this big sword, see this boss, cool right, come play Dark Souls with me, looks like we can even team up to fight bosses later. A shield and a longsword, let's carry the flame in this world of despair. If you're my brother, come to Lothric and light the fire with me. Isn't the fire keeper pretty? Isn't this knight handsome? Want to join me and light the fire? A lot of players tried hard to lure their friends to join the mission of linking the fire. Besides that, photos of Lucas from a few months ago at a game expo, as well as pictures from an earlier online event, were dug up by players. Combined with his old quote from a year ago calling himself a warrior of love, this pushed him back onto the trending topics list. Especially with some Photoshop masters creating memes, Lucas even became part of reaction images. In the expo photo, Lucas originally held a microphone, but now it was replaced with the Dark Souls game icon. Next to it was a caption greeting players warmly, ready to light the fire. And under Lucas's official post announcing Dark Souls' release, countless comments like, "I'll light the fire, and this fire must be passed on," suddenly changed. Now they were all saying, whoever wants to light the fire can do it. We're done, we can't keep it up anymore. Inside the game so far, enemies like Eudex Gunda, regular hollows, Lothric knights, winged knights, the katana guy, crystal lizards, and the dreaded mimics that have killed countless players. They all got their own memes, like, "Can you feel the producer's burning passion?" or "This is my love for the players." These jokes spread and gave Dark Souls a second wave of popularity. It added even more fuel to the game's sales. Of course, under all this hype was the players' frustration. As the game kept trending, many players started tagging Lucas on the official account, asking him to become the fire leader and guide everyone to link the fire together. They said that the amazing promo video from the online event was supposedly made by Lucas himself. But that was just a rumor, and many players still wanted to see Lucas suffer, so they kept hyping things up. Even though countless content creators and streamers were already suffering on video platforms and live streams. It's different when the one suffering is the developer himself. The thrill and excitement just hit different. Nebula Games office. "Boss Lucas, what's the plan going forward?" asked Ethan from the marketing team, sounding a bit unsure. Even though he was very confident in Dark Souls' quality. But Lucas knew that the success of a game doesn't depend only on its quality. Marketing and promotion can give a huge boost. Simply put, a game's quality sets the lower limit for its sales, but if you want it to sell well and have a big impact. Besides quality, you need good promotion and hype. There are plenty of examples of this in the past. The most famous one is Titanfall 2. When it comes to quality, its reviews were amazing. Aside from its single-player campaign being too short, it had almost no flaws and was better than the first game in every way. Yet, it still failed miserably. The main reason was that its competitors were too strong. Battlefield 1, COD, Infinite Warfare, and Overwatch, all huge FPS games focused on online multiplayer, came out at the same time. On top of that, Titanfall 2 didn't get much marketing support, so the only path it had left was failure. So, regarding the mixed reviews of Dark Souls after its release, even though the data showed no major problems, Lucas still confirmed some follow-up plans with Ethan, including gidding discussions around the game's popularity. But before they even acted on it, the game's direction was already improving thanks to players defending it on their own online. Keep our official game forum in good shape. Also, we can prepare to open the Dark Souls workshop when the time comes. As for operations, stop everything except for ad placements. Sitting in his chair, Lucas thought for a moment and said this to Ethan. After that, Lucas also talked with Ethan about Dark Souls merchandise. Mainly some future figure products and such, but Nebula Games wouldn't make them themselves. They would license them out, only handling later quality checks. When Ethan left the office, Lucas sat down in front of his computer and opened Dark Souls. He had noticed the various player tags directed at him on the official account during his free time. However, he had no plans for live streaming. For now, most players were still in the early stage of figuring out Dark Souls. So he preferred not to interfere too much in that area. But he still planned to make use of the game's popularity. No live streaming, but making some edited Dark Souls videos was fine. It would be a good way to guide and reassure the players. End of the chapter. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.